Welcome to the Unstoppable Recording Machine Podcast, brought to you by the 2017 URM Summit, a once-in-a-lifetime chance to spend 4 days with the next generation of audio professionals and special guests, including Andrew Wade, Kane Churko, Billy Decker, Fluff, Brian Hood, and many more. The inspiration, ideas, and friendship you'll get here are the things that you'll look back on as inflection points in your life. Learn more at urmsummit.com. The URM podcast is also brought to you by Heirloom Microphones. Heirloom microphones are high-end condenser microphones with something that has never been seen in the microphone industry, a triangular membrane. With our patented membranes and our tailored phase linear electronics, your recording and live experience will never be the same. Heirloom, our microphones will help you discover clarity. Go to ehrlund.se for more info. And now your hosts, Joey Surges, Joel Renasek, and EYAL Levy.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Joey Sturgis Forum podcast. Once again, thanks for listening, thanks for tuning in. And today we're going to be talking to special guest Jay Maas. Am I saying that right?
You are.
Correct. Awesome. Thank you for joining us and welcome.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I just want to say that Jay is in Australia right now, and it's 7:30 in the morning. And I feel like 7:30 in the morning studio time is more like waking up at 3 a.m. for something.
Hold on a second. I do that shit every single day of my entire career.
Yeah, but
you're a unicorn.
Yeah, man, you're a unicorn.
You're one of those weirdos.
I agree. It's early.
Now, do you ever find? I guess we'll just open this right up because I want. This is questions on topic about time waking up in the morning and stuff. Do you get bands to get on that level or what is it? How does that work for you?
It varies, but typically, yeah, I have bands adhere to my schedule just because my studio is usually booked out with night sessions and B-room sessions and all this stuff too. So it's pretty important that they come in during the hours that we kind of allocated. That's not to say that a lot of times sessions don't run late or whatever, but yeah, typically we try to get everybody up, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, coffee, let's go.
So you mean you run your business like an actual organized business? That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I try to.
Kind of the opposite of what most studio experiences I've been a part of have been. So yeah, as I understand it, you trained at Berkeley. What can you tell us a little bit about that? And kind of just give us your story in terms of how you got started.
And I want to just, before you say that, was it worth it?
Okay, so this is actually a pretty good story.
I dropped out, so I've got my opinion.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, what's yours? Yeah.
I bet I dropped out quicker. So basically, when I was in between my junior and senior year of high school, I think my mom realized pretty early, like, the only thing my child is going to be good at is music and skateboarding, and there's probably more money in music. Arguably, maybe not. So I went to the Berkeley Summer Sessions, which is like this 5-week intensive course that focuses on guitar playing, songwriting. I graduated in 98, so it must have been 97.
Whoa, that's when I went.
No way.
Yeah, to the summer session.
Yeah, dude, totally. That's really weird.
Crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was there in 97, and the trajectory of my life really just looked like, okay, it looks like Jay's going to be playing music. So I ended up applying for and getting into Berkeley the following year, which is insane because my grades were terrible due to the skateboarding and music. and so I got in, and I was in line to get my photo ID, and I just was like, dude, I don't want to do this. It was like so much money, and I was like, I just want, because like I had another band and we were supposed to go on tour and there was all this shit, and I was just like, fuck this. So I just didn't. I got out of line and I went up to the bursar's office and was like, hey, can I get my money back? And they were pretty good. They were like, yeah, actually you can get most. And I was like, great, let's do that. And instead I went and I enrolled in a computer science program. And yeah, but then I just kept touring and touring and touring. So I've been finishing that degree still online. I'll finish this year. But even now that I'm not in Defeater anymore, I still travel a ton for recording. So I still need to do like a degree that's, I don't know, flexible with my location.
Is there a reason you feel the need to finish it? Is it like just because you like to finish what you started, or is there an actual career reason to finish it? Because it sounds like career-wise, things are already in place.
Yeah, career-wise, things are pretty good. My reasons for finishing would be money I've already invested into it. Like, I get nothing from it if I don't finish it. I'm just like the type of person that finishes things, and even if it takes me a decade. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the other thing too is like, I'm a very avid planner. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, down the road, like, am I going to be, I mean, the industry's already changed so much in the last 10 years. Like 10 years from now, like maybe I'm still a relevant force. Hopefully I'm still a relevant force. I'll definitely be the best engineer I can be in 10 years. I'll be 10 years better than I am now. The bigger questions for me is like, is that going to matter to kids? Like, I always feel like I'm in that movie Hook, you know, where like, but I'm the only one getting older. Like I'm in Neverland and like,
Yes.
Peter
like,
Pan.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm in Neverland and everyone is staying the same age. Like, my clients are all in their, mid-20s, and I just keep getting older and better, but will I be the relevant option for them in 15 years? When I'm 50, I hope. I don't know.
It's good to think that way, in my opinion, because you don't want to be the guy who didn't think that way and then not be relevant and have a horrible situation when you're that age.
Yeah, totally. My ultimate dream is to get this degree and then never use it. But, whatever. Yeah.
Well, I find that interesting because I know I wasn't technically in a computer science class of any sort, but I was definitely into computer science. And that played a huge role in how I approach everything from editing to production to business to hobbies and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, that's really cool to meet another person who is in audio, mostly in audio, but also into computer science.
Like, do you think about it from a computer science perspective at all? Like, does any of that apply to the way you approach production?
Oh, totally. I mean, when I first started, actually, Joey, I listened to your podcast, the Working Class Audio podcast, and that's the first time I had heard that you were so into computer science, and it made a ton of sense. So when I first started recording, my mentor was Kurt Ballou from Converge.
We love Kurt.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah, Kurt rules. And, Kurt, I just was like this squeaky wheel that Kurt, who kept being like, listen to my mix, and eventually we became friends, and he was actually willing to do so. But, I'm like a computer science dude whose favorite band is Fugazi. So while I was approaching everything from a software standpoint, both from a financial position, because, I'd go to God City and the place is full of awesome gear and it's really, really impressive. But I was like, dude, it just seemed like such an insurmountable task to acquire all that shit. So I was like, I want to do this, but I definitely cannot afford to do it the way Kurt is doing it. So I would take like a lot of his input and I would apply it to the software domain. I'm an avid Cubase. That's a pun. I'm an avid Cubase user.
Nice.
Yeah. And so I started on Nuendo, and then after Yamaha bought Steinberg and the two product lines sort of branched off, I obviously followed the Cubase line, but use Pro Tools like on a near daily basis because I travel so much. But yeah, so I don't know. I really do. I think about things from like a software standpoint first, but then I've gotten into hardware because my influences started there. So I'm like really into pieces that are great either on the way in, like distressors or like 500 series EQs or stuff like that. And then I'm really interested on things on my bus work, but less interested on like stemming out a rack tom to a bunch of outboard gear just to print it back in. You know what I mean? I'll make some adjustments on the way in. And
what are some of your favorite pieces going in?
for me, I have a retro audio stay level that I think is awesome, especially on the right vocalist, combined with like the right mic and I like tube preamps for vocals typically. That stay level is sick, and you combine it with a distressor. Distressor's doing more of that like lop off the transient stuff, and the stay level is doing more of the sweeten mojo juicy tube stuff.
What is the stay level? I've heard of it, but I don't really know what it is.
Think of it as like a mono vari-mu that's typically used for tracking. So it's, you know how like vari-mu compressors basically get their compression by varying the voltage to a tube. So it's like that. So it's another take on a Very compression. I think Very mute compression is like terrible for transients. Like I had a Manley Very mute. I might get another one. They're really good, but I had a Manley Very mute and I hated the compression, but I loved the color. Just something about running shit through there. It's not modern or grabby, but it has like a high-end sheen that I don't know how to EQ into anything. And I don't know if it's the sheen or if it's just a combination, but it also does something like really pleasing to the low mids. It just takes away some boxiness, adds some like big bottom stuff, almost like if you couldn't adjust very mild settings on a Pultec or something like that.
Interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've got a massive passive, and sometimes I'll just use it on my master bus, even if I don't EQ, just because I like how it sounds engaged. There's just a certain,
it's a great piece.
Something to it that it just adds, and either you like it or you don't.
Yep, pretty much. The problem I'm finding is just that, with recall and workflow and the expense of having, stay levels or massive passives or Very mutes around, it's just like, what I did is I did like an Andrew Shep style blind shootout to my clients and was like, here's one with a Very mute, here's one without. As far as the clients are concerned, half of them are like, I like this one, I like that one. They didn't notice. So it was hard to justify the cost, and it was also hard to justify the hit to my workflow. From like a personal sonic standpoint, I typically liked the Very mute better, but you have to ask yourself too, is that just because I'm a big nerd, I know it's running through the Very mute? Do I actually prefer this? Am I trying to justify my expense?
So workflow wise, but I'd be interested to know how you balance using so much outboard, but also quick turnaround times that are required nowadays.
Well, typically for pieces of gear that don't have, like, I have Fatso that I use on next to everything. I've found little that doesn't sound better after running it through the Fatso. I think it's really just the second and third harmonic generation that just brings things forward. It's really pleasing. You can make things ugly with it, but it's kind of hard. But things like my Fatso, which are pretty easily recallable, I'll do quick recalls. So I commit a lot of hardware on the way in, and then I will use pieces that aren't a complete and total nightmare to recall on the way out. Bus work, drum bus, stereo bus, maybe stereo vocal bus. But I do print as much of that back in as I possibly can. If I could, I wish there was a way to print my drum bus stuff back in and still be flexible enough to have someone say, like, can you add a kick drum? Like, fuck. But you kind of can't. But there's also some really great plugins, like that Vertigo VSE2 compressor plugin is sick. It actually kind of sounds like hardware. Again, clients don't fucking care. So, but I use that. I use my Fatso. But most of my hardware stuff's on the way in.
I think committing is so important anyways, even if you're not trying to do it to save time. It just makes for better mixes.
Totally agree. It's
like a state of mind to get into, and to really put yourself out there as well, to learn from your lessons or learn from your mistakes. If you put something out into the world on a deadline and you weren't 100% happy with it, you're going to be a little bit more careful about your choices and your decisions on your next project, and that's going to make you better. So that's very important, I believe.
Yeah, I love printing through hardware when you're tracking in terms of committing, because it helps you position things for mixing. Because if you use a different transformer or op amp or just, whatever, it kind of like gives each piece of audio you run through it like a different identity. So you can position your guitars around your, cymbals, for example, by just using a different piece of gear and getting its sound on it. So it helps kind of set up stuff for mixing. So I definitely am with you, Jay. I love tracking as much stuff as I can through hardware, and I'll just unnecessarily put something through a piece of gear just to get its tone, even if I'm not using it.
Yeah, actually a trick I've been using is, my patch bay is all half normaled. So I'll just patch in, I'll let a clean signal go down right into my converters, and then especially with things like transients, drums and stuff, and then I'll just shoot okay, cool, here's my snare on the way in. I'm going to EQ this with maybe an API 550B, and then I'm going to hit a distressor or whatever on the way in. And as far as I can tell, this sounds fucking sick. But I also have a uncompressed version coming in at the exact same time I get basically 2 for 1 off of one mic. And then if I want to use drum samples or something like that, I can trigger off the uncompressed. I can blend in the compressed. All that stuff's already kind of done for me, which is tight.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. I've totally done that before as well.
Do you, just out of curiosity, do you mix as you go, or is it a whole separate process for you?
Oh, I totally mix as I go. Yeah, for sure.
So by the time the recording is done, is it kind of close to final-ish?
Yeah, I mean, I like making those decisions with the artist. So a lot of times a band's like, okay, we have this much time for tracking. And I'm like, can you stick around for mixing? I'm probably one of the few engineers that likes attended mixing sessions better.
I think you're the only one that we've talked to in over 60 episodes who's said that. Like, can you guys think of another guy who's said that?
No,
you're the one.
You're the unicorn.
Yeah.
Tell us your ways.
Proud to be. No, see, I really like it because I usually have the band pull up, pour a glass of bourbon, beer, I don't know, coffee, depends what time of day. Is it afternoon? And then we'll just kind of kick it. And I just like hitting spacebar. And then like when I hear something that sucks, I'll just hit it again and be like, yo, what do you think about blah, blah, blah? Totally rearranging this. Like having the artist with me for that also being a creative process is really, really fun for me. Also, it makes you're like taking the artist on the adventure with you. So they have the memories of like when you guys made that decision together. You're way less likely to get them to fucking hem and haw about like, well, I don't really know if I like that effect. And if they don't like it, they'll tell you right then. And they're like, yeah, I think I liked it better before. And you're like, cool, done, sorted, over, right? So like you make them a part of the mixing experience, and then there might still be like 1 or 2 little like, I can't hear the octave guitar or like some bullshit like later. But, by and large, by the time they walk out the door, they're usually like, dude, we think it sounds fucking awesome. They're emotionally committed, as well.
I guess the fact that you're mixing along the way too helps. It's not like you're starting from scratch with the artist there.
Yeah, I would not want to do that. Like I would at least want to get a mix up that when we start to play it, they're already like, yo, this is sick. But we do that while we work. Now that's different, of course. Like I do a ton of work for bands that I never meet. So in that case, I ask for references. I try to get on a call and talk about what they're after. A lot of times, like the bands, especially if they work with me, they feel like I have to tell Jay that I want it really natural. And I'm like, okay, cool. What does that mean to you? And sometimes the records they reference are like, really natural, like this record. And I'm like,
that's not natural.
Shit, that's like fucking programmed. So I'm like, okay, cool. Really natural, like that. Got it.
So do you use any special tricks to try to decipher what the artist actually means as opposed to what they say?
Yeah, I'm mostly references like, what are you guys listening to? Like, what do you like? That's so much better than listening to them like try to wax on about their own like sonic envisionment for themselves, which is usually close to useless.
Yeah, make it sound like it's in space. That's one of my favorite notes.
Dude, that shit is insane. Yeah.
Yeah. You mean make it sound like nothing?
I got a mixed note this year. It said, all right, we love the way it sounds. Hey, can you do a mix where the guitars are quieter on headphones?
That's a good one.
What the fuck?
Yeah. I was like, that's called a second mix.
It's like some Twilight Zone shit. Like, I don't even know what to say to something like that.
Yeah.
I would just delete the email.
I think what would happen for me is the translator in me would come out, how we talked about being a producer is like being a musical translator because people don't know what the fuck they're talking about.
I think that was our second episode ever, by the way, musical translator, for those of you listening.
So it's like if someone tells me that, then that tells me that something to do with the panning or the spatial like relationship is off. Like maybe the guitars need to be more mono or like less mono or whatever. So yeah.
Stereo widener bullshit. Turn it off.
Yeah, I think this was a case of mid-range. I think this was a case of they played in like a really low drop tuning. When they took it to their home system, they were like, this sounds sick. And then didn't find themselves having that same power on smaller listening devices. So what we ended up doing was like actually Fatso, like a ton of harmonics generation, which represents those low fundamentals, like up in the higher frequencies. And then they were happy. But, mix it so it's louder in headphones or whatever. I was just like, fuck me.
You just got to become a detective and understand what they actually mean. I think I saw
exactly.
Jay Rustin say he posted once that he got a mix note that said, "Could you turn up the drums, guitar, vocals, and keyboards?" And his response was, "Why don't I just turn down the bass?"
Right.
Yeah, just turn down the bass and it was solved.
Yeah. I think being a recording engineer is funny because you do have to do a lot of that translating, and especially if you do a lot of tracking too. You're like you're like a therapist. You're like a UN negotiator. Like you have to wear all these like weird hats. And like one band member will be like trying to leverage his idea through you to other band members. Like, Jay, don't you think this is a good idea?
Absolutely.
That's so classic.
How do you deal with that kind of stuff?
I draw those lines pretty quickly. I'm like, guys, this is your product. I'll always give you my honest opinion, but nobody's allowed to get butthurt with me because we're just trying to make a good record.
All in it for the same reason.
Yeah, totally.
Hopefully.
I like that. And that's something that we heard from Wade, I think he said that on the show.
He said
Pretty
that.
sure.
Yeah, he did. He said that the way he tells bands is that they shouldn't get offended because they're all in it for the same reason, which is the best song possible so that everyone can profit from it. And it's not about the money, but if the song does well, everybody's careers will keep on going. And that's the name of the game, is to be able to keep going. So don't get offended by a suggestion or something. Everybody's in it to win it.
Yeah, totally. And I think I deal with like maybe the other side of clients more than he does. I deal with clients who are too fucking punk, who are like want to basically ensure that people aren't going to like it sometimes, like
That's great.
Yeah, I'll always be adding these suggestions like for kind of like listener accessibility reasons. Like, guys, we haven't repeated a part and everything's distorted. Like,
Can I get the black metal low end, please?
Yeah, like, can we do this? And people are like, I don't know, man. I'm not trying to sell out. Like, oh, dude, trust me, you're not.
So, like, how do you phrase it differently to guys who have the elitist kind of mentality? Like, do you try to phrase it in a way that won't trigger the that's corporate music shit mentality?
Maybe I should, not really. My give a fucks are so low that I just am just so straight up. I'm just like, yeah, I think that's stupid. Like, we probably shouldn't do that.
Boom. I think we've talked about that too. Like, it's important to be honest like that. Like, but to also know when that doesn't necessarily make sense, I think, as well. Because there's been times where, being brutally honest wasn't the best course of action. So I'm curious if you've ever encountered that, or if you're just straightforward always.
No, yeah, look, I've literally never been a dick to any of my clients, and I never would be like outright a dick. And if I'm saying like, hey, that's stupid, we've already like developed a rapport where I can say that to them and they know that I'm just not a passive aggressive person. I'm not going to take shit personally. We're all here for the same reason. So yeah, you handle different clients differently. They all get handled very honestly, and I'm pretty direct, but yeah, totally. My first day or two of the recording is figuring out like, okay, like who's the little bitch of the band, like who actually knows what they're doing, and like figuring out like who's, and then what, because every band has like the fake democracy where,
yeah,
like where everyone's like, yeah, my opinion matters, but probably there's only one opinion in the room that matters, and figuring out, okay, maybe two, like who's that guy, and then how do I primarily deal with that guy without making the rest of the band feel like I'm only dealing with that guy.
What about when it's that guy, but that guy is not like the boss? So like, when the most talented guy with the best vision happens to be like a beta male or something.
Yeah, I just dealt with that. And, you give that guy a lot of love and support. You're like, I really think, not to name names, but because I just recorded this band and they'll figure it out, but I really think such and such has a really good idea right now. Why don't we try that out? And then like, idiot alpha male guy will then be like not wanting to step on my toes because they like hired me and I'm supposed to be the all-knowing audio god who's going to change their life. And then we try the idea, lo and behold, it works. And then you basically start to build a foundation for that dude in the band. Like, hey, yeah, another one of his ideas that seemed to be not stupid. Maybe we should listen to him.
He's 3 for 3. Come on, keep him coming.
Yeah, exactly.
I've actually had experiences where the musical alpha male is not the alpha male in the band hierarchy, personality wise, and this has happened a few different times. So when I say he, I mean a combination of like 5 different guys is he. He will purposefully take himself out of the equation, like somehow be out to dinner or doing something or not available so that he doesn't have to cause any sort of disruption against the other guy. So I had a situation on a record I did a couple of years ago where one guitar player was fucking stellar and the other guy really sucked. The guy who was stellar was just kind of a pussy, and it was one of these things where it's not like one guy is like okay and the other guy's pretty good. It was like, you know, one guy's A+ and the other guy's a D-. So I tried to communicate to him that I needed him in the room while we were tracking guitars at all time. So instead of argue with me or anything, he just left. he didn't want to even like confront me and be like, well, I don't want them to feel bad or whatever. He just left completely. Came back like the next day. And so I recorded the song with the other guy. And then when he heard it, he kind of flipped out because he was like, why does that sound like shit?
Because you left.
Yeah, because you left, dude. Because you weren't going to track it. You didn't track it. That's why it sounds like shit. It's not you. It should be you.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think it's a really great point to just reiterate, you know, since we're kind of in the middle of it, talking about how important psychology is, just how actually important freaking learning psychology and learning how to read and work with different types of personalities is as a producer. It's like probably one of the most important skill sets you can develop as a producer. And it's just absolutely the cornerstone of most human interaction you're going to have here in the studio.
Yeah. I mean, it's huge for client retention too.
It's huge also for just being a dude who gets hired or gets an internship or whatever.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
Guys who creep people out or whatever, even if they're skilled, won't get gigs as opposed to people who are just cool to be around.
Oh, 100%. I think that works for all aspects of life, but definitely in the studio too. It's like usually such like a emotionally stressful environment. You need like dudes who like people just like, you know, like I went through so many interns and the assistant I have now is like the fucking man, and people just like it. They like him better than they like me. You know what I mean? Like they just,
that's great.
Yeah, he's just like super talented, super hardworking. Everyone likes him. And that was like one of the main factors. Like when he came and I met him for the first time, I was like, oh, like I just like kind of want to like kick it with this dude, which means probably other people do too.
I've had that situation with this dude, John Douglas, where he's just nicer than me. There's nothing I can do about it. He's just nicer than me. What can I do? I'm a fucking dick.
These things happen.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good thing. I definitely have had guys who, well, John is an amazing engineer, so let's not include him in this. But I've had guys who were somewhat skilled, but were just weirdos, and I couldn't justify taking the time to work them into the process because you constantly have to deal with them weirding out the clients, and that's. You know, it doesn't matter how good you are if you're weirding out the clients.
Yeah, and you usually know because the client will kind of like give you a look like, hey, man, fuck this guy, you know, and you're like, you know, and you kind of look at the client like, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, they usually make a comment to you within the first 2 or 3 days if they don't like it.
Yeah, so we mentioned this earlier, but I just want to bring this up. You said that you travel a lot for recording, and it's interesting because I used to tour like 10 months a year. And when I decided to stop touring and go studio full time, and now with what I do with all this online stuff, one of the things that has remained important to me is traveling and working in different places. Like I've never been able to shake that bug. Have you always been into traveling, or is it since touring you just have always wanted to keep that being in different places a part of your life?
Yeah, it's really ironic because I'm such a homebody, and I have to work, and I go where the business is, and I go where the good opportunities are. I'm not so much of a homebody, I'd shoot myself in the foot. But like, no, actually, I don't really like traveling that much, but I've chosen to be in a band my whole life and then now be an engineer that does projects overseas all the time. So that's odd how that worked out. But I don't like hate it. It's fine. But like, I have like this cool house with like my coffee maker and my big TV and like all my shit, you know, and I'm just like kind of, maybe it's just because I've been on the road for like the last 17 years.
I understand.
I just like miss and sort of romanticize what it is to like wake up and wipe my ass with my towel. You know what I mean? And
well, you can trade with me because I need to get the hell out.
Well, in 2015, I made it a point to travel as little as possible because I had racked up 75,000 sky miles like the last 3 years in a row, like every year, and it was over it. Like I just wanted to stay in one place and focus on building what we're all building together, and that was nice. But I feel ready to travel now. Like I've been like at Joey's place for a month and a half, and if he doesn't kill me, I'm having a good time. Like I'm enjoying not being home.
Cool.
I personally don't like working in new environments. I think it's really destructive to the flow. I think one of the most important things that has been very, very responsible for my success is becoming comfortable in my own spot. You know, getting the table at the right height, getting the mouse pad that you like, getting the speakers put in just the right place, getting the right screen that you like. All these things.
For sure.
You know, that to me was everything. And also doing that was what made me prepared for pretty much anything a band would ever throw at me. You know, a band would come in and say, oh, we want to do this, we want to do that. Well, I'd had everything set up to where that was like pretty much on doable, like whatever it is. If you go into like a commercial facility, like a normal studio, like let's say NRG Studios or something, everything that you want to do is totally doable. But the problem is it all is just going to take time because they set it up and tear it down, and because different clients are always coming in and out, and it really is kind of like a roadblock sometimes, especially if someone's coming into the studio and they're all amped up and there's like in a creative zone or something. And then like you've got 2 hours of setup and they just like lose that, you know.
I couldn't agree more.
It happens a lot. So I totally see that.
Yeah, but don't you ever go stir crazy? I mean, for example, I've been operating out of the same, two spots now for eternity. And it's just like after 6 months to a year, I'm like, I gotta get the hell out of here. I gotta go fly somewhere on vacation. It's got to be really exotic and it's got to be very different from here because I'm just sick of being in the same shit every single day. And I'm with you on definitely like workflow, but I always lose my mind if I'm doing the same thing for too long in the same location.
Same
This
here.
is interesting because like a lot of bands go through this too, and I've noticed that. And part of my whole this goes in a lot of different ways. Like part of the whole experience for what I do, like being out in the country and being away from things, that's super attractive to labels and managers because they're like, oh, the band's going to be working on the album. They're not going to be going to the fucking Whiskey Go-Go or the Rainbow Room or whatever it's called every night. That sounds cool. But then you get the band in and you've got to deal with them, right? You've got to deal with how bored they are, how interested they are, keeping them on track and productive and all that. So I don't know. I've got a situation now where I feel like it works pretty well, but it's super important. Like once you start getting further and further into your career, you gotta find a way to balance everything.
You know, I'm just going to say that this is a perfect example of how just different people work different ways. And it's most important for people to figure out what works best for them. Because if I'm in the same place for too long, I almost feel like the light bulb doesn't turn on as bright as usual. Like it gets duller and duller as the situation becomes more and more comfortable. And when I go to a new place, it's a lot easier for me to keep a tighter schedule and to be a lot more like in the moment and just do a better job. It's weird. I mean, I've got a pretty sick home setup too, and there's a lot of value in that. I just like to keep a balance of home time and travel for work time. I like both.
Yeah, I'll also say that it's weird because I don't get stir crazy, but since the age of like 18, I've literally sat on a computer pretty much
same.
as many waking hours as possible. So I'm kind of into that, but other bands or pretty much every band is not.
I think my parents fucked me up. I think that's what it is because They just had me traveling from the time that I was born, like all the time. And it's cool and all, but I feel like that was probably just ingrained from a really, really young age that that's how life is. And so if I don't do that, I don't know. I feel like it's got something to do with that because the amount that I traveled in those formative years is kind of unreasonable. So it's probably stems back from that. Thanks, Mom.
Yeah, totally. I feel you there. I traveled and moved a ton, but I think for me, I'm probably just romanticizing home because I just was like, I'm never there. And like, I'm super bad at vacation, you know, like any girl I've ever dated has just hated my guts because, well, for so many reasons, but one of which would be, you know, we're like, oh, we're finally like at the beach. Isn't this great? And I'm just like, dude, this fucking sucks. Like it's sandy and the water's cold and I have emails coming in and dude, I'm just the worst.
You got to turn off that internet and that phone.
Impossible.
I understand.
I have to do it by force, so I've just adapted.
This is going to sound weird, but I totally had to learn how to vacation. And one of the quickest ways to do that, and this is a suggestion to anyone listening who doesn't know how to vacation properly, like you, Jay, is you gotta just put yourself in a scenario where that shit just isn't available to you. Like, I went on a cruise and the internet was like fucking $20 a minute or some shit.
Right.
It was just retarded. It was just to the point where it's like, I'm not wasting my money on this. I'm not going to get the internet. You don't have cell phone signal. You're in the middle of nowhere. You're in the ocean. You go out on the ship. You look around. All you can see is blue water and blue sky, and there's nothing else. There's no land visible in any direction. And it forces you to just have a good time and to be on vacation. And that's a good first one, a good first vacation for anybody is struggling with that.
That's actually what I like about cruises too, is that you literally have no choice in the matter. Because if I have a choice, I'm going to answer my emails.
Why do you think I always go to weird places in Russia? Because they don't have fucking internet and iPhone and all that shit. And it's like, there's literally no way for me to communicate. So when I come back in 3 weeks, I've actually relaxed because I haven't checked my email 72 times a day compulsory. I don't have any voicemails or texts freaking me out right before I go to bed. And, you know, it's nice. You can actually enjoy yourself. You have to physically unplug. It's the only way to do it.
I go to weird places in Russia for reasons that may not be appropriate for this podcast, but that's another good reason to go.
We got to compare notes then.
Reasons that are not appropriate for the podcast. Now, that's interesting.
Well,
now, hold on. What kind of podcast is this?
Yeah. Let's change the format.
Let's just say, let's change the subject on that one. We do have a couple questions from the audience. Maybe we can jump into that. We are getting close to time here, so let's see what we got. Daniel.
Let's just say Daniel.
Thanks for being subscribable, Daniel. He's asking, how do you process your rooms? And I'm assuming he means drum rooms.
Well, yeah, and he says, and a general philosophy about how you keep things sounding natural while still punching through a mix.
Yeah, I get that question a lot. I think I was actually going to write a tweet, but forgot yesterday about room mics and about how it's funny that I'll set up like 16 mics, but there's 2 little mics that no one notices in the back of the room that are doing half the work at least. So it really, because they are room mics, it really, really depends on the room. If you have a really small room, it's borderline like don't even bother, but you can get some awesome results if the drums have a little bit of area to breathe. Very, very selective equalization is really important. So, mitigate the things that are annoying in the EQ and try to highlight the things that are cool. I find really I just mitigate the annoying and that sort of highlights the things that are cool for me. And then good compression, like compressors that are awesome. Distressors are obviously a first choice for this. 1176s are really good for this. And the plugin iteration like the CLA 76 is totally doable. I was using like the API 2500 plug to do this for a while, but I just don't think it's as open as the CLA 76. So you could use that, or you could use the UA 76 too. But in phase management, so like if you aren't out there with a tape measure, while you're setting up your drums, and if you don't like fully understand phase, that's like the first thing, because you can't have your room mics doing you any yeah, you can't have your room mics or any of your mics doing you any favors until you truly understand phase. So once you understand phase, then get your measuring tape out, do your stuff. Then before you record anything, get like deep into your samples, make sure like all your transients are lining up, like nip that shit in the bud. Then you can just work and you won't have problems on the back end, because like time align and phase issues on the back end of a mix, you're fucked, man. Like you're just totally crippled. So if you get all that stuff right, your drums should sit very nicely into your rooms. I do an XY pair almost always, and like basically as far away from the kit as I can get. I'm not worried about my hi-hat being on the left and my ride cymbal being on the right or anything like that. These are two like iterations of reflected mono that are capturing the amplitude of the waveform at the exact same time. So they're basically two phase compatible mono iterations of the drum set that I then hard pan, because it still sounds fairly centered since the capsules of the microphones are so close to begin with. And yeah, dude. And then you can do it two ways. You can start with those and then start tucking close mics in, or you can start with close mics and start tucking the rooms in. I just kind of sit there and juggle the faders till it sounds cool to me. But the most important thing is like a lot of times on room mics, you're going to have to shave off some like super high end. You're probably going to have to shave, like there'll be one or two spots where your cymbals have resonant frequencies in those rooms in the mid range, anywhere from like 2 to like 12K. There might be a couple peaks that are like piercing and annoying. Fuck it. Like you can get in there and notch those if you want. And then maybe some just general, like, what do I want the vibe? Like these rooms sound boomy. Cool. So let's high pass a little bit and let's like tilt down a little bit. You don't have to be a scientist about it, but just like make them sound cool to you and compress them with something like an appealing compressor, I guess. Yeah. But that's
I have a question about your rooms, actually, about lining them up. So when you have a distant room, for instance, and naturally the transient will come in a little later, not like when you have a top snare and bottom snare that are out of phase or something. Like when the transient just happens later because it's further away, do you line those up to the
no, definitely
direct
not.
transients? Okay, I don't either.
No, yeah, because if the transient in the room waveform is far enough away, like appropriately far enough away, it's going to be further back than basically almost all the energy of the close mic piece of the transient anyway. So it's not really conflicting with the bulk of like the close mic transient. It's like its own thing. And that little bit of delay is part of what makes it sound bigger.
Yes. Cool. Yeah, some guys when they line stuff, I just wanted to clarify this because I didn't want people to think that you meant line up every single transient, like even distant mics. Because I know some guys who do that. I've tried it. It sounds weird. Like it doesn't, like what gives it that
I don't think
length
it sounds right.
is that delay.
100%.
All right, so we have a question from Wes Deloach, which is, two-part question. First is, I'd like to know if Jay works with any amp sims and how he feels about them. And I would also like to hear what his typical mastering chain consists of, specifically what he uses for mix bus compression and how hard he compresses the mix.
Oh, okay. So amp sims and I don't typically play that nicely, but that's just like, there are a million great records that use sims. Actually, records I didn't even think had sims on them, I found out were simmed. Oh, dude, like perfect example, even though it's Axe Effects, that Deftones record with the weird Japanese name, that record sounds sick. And then I found out it's all Axe Effects. And I was like, well, fuck me. Like, it sounds amazing. But for most of the bands I get, I have a Kemper. I kind of think it sucks. Like, I don't really use it that much. To me, it just sounds weird and 2D. And as a guitar player, I don't know. I'm just not like
firmware
not
do you
feeling
have?
it. That's newest firmware. Maybe I haven't dicked around with it enough, but there's like an inherent color to the Kemper, I guess,
Yes.
for lack of a better term, that like I hear immediately. And it's actually for me more on the back end of the note than the front end. So I think it does a good job of like and like getting like the attack of the note okay, but it's like the resonance of the note that doesn't seem to be as like nice on my ears as like the resonance of just a speaker moving against a mic.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and that's been different on different firmware versions. And what's interesting is that they got it right, and then on a future update, they got it wrong.
Of course.
So I've kept mine on the I don't remember which one it is. I'll like look it up and email it to you. But there is a version where they got, especially the low end, which was one of the biggest problems with it. They got that right, but I know exactly what you're talking about. And on the shittier firmware versions, that's definitely an issue.
Yeah, and for me, I own like a ton of awesome amps. I own a bunch of great cabs and mics and stuff. So like, I actually find it's quicker to just like throw up a microphone that is good in front of a guitar sound that is good and fucking call it a day, rather than like dick around with like, like all this shit with the Kemper. I'm usually not as happy with it anyway, and it's usually a little less inspiring to the types of artists that I use. I also almost never track DIs. I'm like super committal. So even when I'm overseas, like people are like, how come you're not taking a DI? I'm like, cause I'm punk as fuck. But, you know,
Punk AF.
There you go,
Today's
you guys.
moral.
Yeah, that's awesome.
yeah. So I just like, yeah, I mean, like, do you like the way it sounds? Like, it sounds good today, right? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, so like, it'll probably sound good tomorrow, you know? So,
You know,
I love it.
trusting your taste is really important.
totally, dude. Totally. And to touch upon that guy's question on mastering and mixed bus compressors. So I'm a huge fan of, I've mentioned it already, but my Empirical Labs Fatso on Buswork, it's great, especially for digital recordings. That's exactly what that piece of gear was intended to do, was like add like cool tape-ish harmonic stuff and also round off annoying like high-end stuff that a lot of times you don't even hear it depending on your monitoring system, but you'll be fucking happy that it's gone. And what's cool about the Fatso is that it attenuates that stuff dynamically. So it's not like a static EQ or anything. It's like the signal's coming in. I don't want to say it's analyzing the signal because it's not a computer, but you know, it's a real compressor with a detector path, and it comes in and it's got that high-end attenuation circuit, and it's totally variable. You know, it's like the best way to put working with outboard gear versus software is like software is an algorithm where like if you conduct the same experiment every time, you'll get the same result. But what's cool about hardware, and to me sonically appealing, is that you won't get the same result in a good way. It'll be fucking close. You know what I mean? It's like if you tried as hard as you could to hit the snare with your left hand at the same force in the center of the snare, it's going to sound a shit ton like the snare that came before it, but it will not be identical. And that's like, I get my jollies from that shit. Like, I think that's cool.
You know, even when you're programming drums, you should take that into consideration. Taking that kind of stuff into consideration, even when working with fake stuff, will help it sound 80 times better, in my opinion.
Yep, I agree. I mean, in the rock genre anyway, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so we want to do a segment with you that we're going to rapid fire gear choices to you. So Joel will mention an instrument, and we just want to hear the first thing that comes to mind. And feel free to go into detail or not go into detail or whatever you feel like sharing about it.
Sweet.
All right, here we go. Overheads.
Overheads would be my Purple Audio Odd equalizers. They're inductor EQs. They're super sweet on the top end.
Trumpet.
Did you just say trumpet?
Yeah.
Absolutely, I did.
But that's the correct answer.
I was just making sure you guys are awake. Okay, distorted heavy electric guitar.
I guess I just used a Royer 101. It was awesome.
Kick drum direct.
Oh, the tried and true, man. AKG D112.
All right. How about acoustic guitar?
Oh, let's see. Any nice small diaphragm condenser, probably an XY pair somewhere around the 12th fret. Call it about 10 inches back.
Bass.
Bass, stay level all day.
Nice.
What about, let's see here, snare.
Actually, people hate this. I really like MD421 on snare. People say the polarity pattern's too wide and there's too much hi-hat spill, and they're not wrong, but I think that the spill I get from the hi-hat is much more listener-friendly than that weird, like, mid-range 57 spill, off-axis spill. So even though it has more spill, I think the spill is more usable. And for my mixing style, it just works better.
Vocals.
This old company, they're gone now, but they're called Soundalux. Soundalux U195. Recently, or not that recently, but the company was purchased by Bach. I haven't tried their stuff, but that old Soundalux stuff is awesome.
Yeah, no kidding. I didn't know they were acquired. That's nuts.
Yep.
I remember when that mic came out.
Oh, yeah, it's super good.
Last but not least, how about piano?
Piano, probably a space pair, maybe AKG C414. The dynamics are tricky with the piano, so also super quiet preamp. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for playing.
Awesome answers. Thank you again for joining us today. We really appreciate your time, and I'm glad to know that there's more of people like me out there in the world that think like a robot.
Absolutely. We should start a support group.
Yeah, maybe that's in the near future. Some kind of Facebook support group for the
Absolutely
for us. So yeah, if people want to check you out, I know you have a website. I think it's JAYMAAS.com.
Yep.
Check it out. You can see some of the gear he's got on there. It's a pretty cool website. And thanks again, man.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. Anytime.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. It's been awesome.
Cool. All right. See you guys.
The Unstoppable Recording Machine Podcast is brought to you by the 2017 URM Summit, a once-in-a-lifetime chance to spend 4 days with the next generation of audio professionals and special guests, including Andrew Wade, Kane Churko, Billy Decker, Fluff, Brian Hood, and many more. The inspiration, ideas, and friendship you'll get here are the things that you'll look back on as inflection points in your life. Learn more at urmsummit.com. The URM podcast is also brought to you by Heirloom Microphones. Heirloom Microphones are high-end condenser microphones with something that has never been seen in the microphone industry, a triangular membrane. With our patented membranes and our tailored phase linear electronics, your recording and live experience will never be the same. Heirloom, our microphones will help you discover clarity. Go to ehrlund.se for more info. To get in touch with the URM podcast, visit urm.com/podcast and subscribe today.